I'll never score. It's just not going to go in. I've lost the touch. Oh, my game's gone. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get dropped. I'll never play football again.
Welcome to the podcast, John Muranka. So, John, for watchers, listeners, do you want to just introduce yourself, who you are and what you do?
Okay, well, John Muranka. Always a difficult one is to say, what do I do? One of the summaries is a practical psychologist. But what I do is help people achieve what they want to achieve, be better themselves, be happier, and perform. And my focus has been, in the main, in business leaders and in sport.
Yeah, and I want to get onto both of those during this podcast. So I want to actually start with sport because I think it's something that a lot of us can relate to. I was trying to think of sportsmen that have probably had difficult times over the last few months, and Jadon Sancho sprung to mind. I think he had a difficult time pre-season and then took some time off and came back and seems to be getting back to his old self. And I just thought, if we took him as an example, somebody who was going through a difficult challenge mentally, seemingly, and if you were given Jadon to work with, I just wanted to understand a bit about, I guess, how you would approach that. And what's the sort of process that you take with a sportsman of that ilk?
Well, caveat with the fact that I don't know Jadon Sancho, don't know his situation, and therefore it's kind of a general comment. Absolutely. But noticing what he went through, had a big transfer, to come to Man United, then. At some point things weren't going as well as they could have done, and a number of things seem to escalate that. So if things are going wrong for people, your mindset is to see everything that fits with going wrong. So he then gets dropped from England. He didn't get picked for Qatar. He missed a penalty, didn't he? A big penalty shootout in at Wembley against Italy. The trouble with that is it reinforces that negative message that you might have about yourself. I'm not saying he had it because I don't know it, but that's potentially what was happening.
And you see that in other sports people or other people that you work with, I guess.
Yeah, all the time. Well, any human being, we all do it. We're having a bad time. We will see. We will pick up the bad things, and it's synchronicity. It's if you buy a new car and you think, this is nice because it's a different colour from everybody else, you then notice the same car again and again and again. It's because you've programmed that into your mind. So that negative programming probably wasn't helping him. So the fact that the manager sent him to Holland, so out of the group he's playing in, sent him away, was probably to help break that cycle. Because if you're having a bad time in the office, you guys having a bad time, every time you walk into the office, you get that reminder of that bad time because the environment's the same, and so it triggers it. So you want to break the trigger. So I think by sending him away was partly to say, right, let's get you out of the environment, reframe it, give you a complete new environment to work in, no pressure because you're not getting picked for the team, you're just going to go get fit physically and mentally. So he was obviously having some mental work then. And once you've re-energized that or reframed it for yourself, you can come back with a better picture. And the great thing was for him, if I'm right, he then was brought back against Nottingham Forest in a cup game, came on for 27 minutes at the end, and the crowd were all chanting his name. Brilliant, because that's a nice reaffirmation of a positive message. Well, I am good, aren't I? Yeah, it's just reminded me. Yeah, so his well-being and self-esteem grows.
I think what's interesting as well with that is it was well publicised, which means that he's more likely to get that support from the crowd when he comes back on for that 27 minutes. And I'm sure there were other players that where it's less well publicised that you just think, I think Dele Alli springs to mind. Someone that you think, something not quite right there. He's just fallen off a cliff in terms of his performance.
Yes.
For a number of years, and you think he's now just getting booed off, and people just think he's lost it, but he clearly hasn't, or he can't possibly have done.
It's such a shame for a player that was one of the best of his generation to just not be able to perform anywhere near the level that everything tells you should
be able to. Some underlying thing. He doesn't lose the ability overnight, does he?
No.
Yeah, exactly. You don't lose your ability, and the thing is, Dele Alli, class player. He's got technical ability. He's capable, all the skills. I would say it's got to be something else, which is likely to be in the field of mental, or emotional,
or outside influence as well, because these people that are susceptible to outside influence, you get famous, you get rich very young, you don't know how to adapt to that if you've grown up in a normal upbringing like we probably all have. So all of a sudden then be inundated with hangers on, an entourage, and £100 a week.
Young age as well, when you're 20 and you're in that situation.
Yeah, and you've got a flash car when you're going to training, and your mates are.
And then you bring in, at that level of performance and sport, you bring in ego, big time.
Yes.
So what's all that doing for you? It's just inflating your ego.
Because they've been standout individuals probably since they were 6. They've been the best player in the playground, through to the best player in the local team, through to a county team, and all their mates
always held up, put on a pedestal,
doing normal jobs that stand out head and shoulders in terms of society.
You're right, when they've been put on that pedestal since they've been 6, and then suddenly things start going wrong. I guess is that part of the problem? There's further to fall when you have been on a pedestal and suddenly you are getting booed by the crowd, you are getting dropped, you're missing penalties. It's a long way to fall, I guess.
Yeah, I would say. The thing is, if you're living by your ego and you're living on having your ego stroked constantly, and you're getting that social acceptance, it's not the world to live in.
No, and the minute
you can only fall from that position because your ego is going to take a knock at some point. Somebody will criticise you. With social media, it's so dangerous because if you read it and when you're getting bad press, it's just going to force that negative feeling, and the ego goes, "Oh, I've lost it." That's the ego inside us. We do have kind of multiple personalities inside us.
It must be scary for them. Well, incredibly harmful. I think I'd fall into the trap of, if I was in the public limelight, what's everyone googling my own name?
Yeah.
What's everyone saying about me?
Absolutely.
And in football, there's so many different opinions. You can have a great game, but there'll still be someone saying you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Still be some criticism levied at you, and I think it can be hurtful. You've got to have a thick skin.
And most opinions, if you take percentages, I don't know facts on this, but I know it from the mental side, will be negative. Because we all like to be negative. We all got an opinion about, oh, well, he didn't do that right. Well, did you? Oh, yeah. He's not very good at this. So it's all very negative opinion, as opposed to, well, my solution is let's start playing 3 at the back and push the 2 fullbacks forward. You don't get so much of that. You get negativity and criticism because it's easier to do. And it's because we're programmed that way.
Yeah.
We're programmed into survival. And in survival, it's, okay, I need to put other people down, and therefore I will get up.
It's some strange human trait, isn't it? I think I liken it to TripAdvisor. When I go and have a great holiday, I'm not going on and saying I had a great holiday.
Yes.
When I had a shocking holiday, I'll be on there saying it was disgusting.
Yep.
And it's just this weird human trait that we've all got, that we find it easy to be critical than positive.
Yeah, it is, and I think there are facts out there that say, for everything you'll get 10 critical comments to every 1 good comment, and that that TripAdvisor one is a good example. And we're all just satisfied. Great, I had a good holiday. Let me get on with what I need to do now. Whereas if I had a bad holiday, I'm gonna tell
everybody.
They're gonna know about this because I'm put out.
What's the conversation like then when you're working with people, I guess it's sportsmen or business people really, but when they're in that negative cycle that you referred to earlier, they're seeing negative comments seemingly everywhere they look. How do you stop that escalating?
Well, one is to break it, as Sancho, using that to try and determine what was happening for him. So break the cycle, so you can break the environment, as that's what happened there, and that will help. Doesn't help fully. It's a bit like the story I tell people. It's like the guy who wants to change his life. He's like, I'm sick of everything. My marriage has gone wrong. My work's bad. I'm going to move countries. I'm going to go live in Canada. And guess what? They go live in Canada for the first 6 months. It's great, lovely. Oh, life's different. And then all of a sudden, guess who shows up? You do. And the same pattern of thinking starts again. And, oh, God, I thought I'd got rid of that type of people. I'm mixing with them again. But actually, the issue is themselves, which is hard to kind of accept for a lot of people. For all of us, difficult to accept that, I'm the problem? For myself? Really?
Well,
that's a great place to start.
I thought you can send him to Holland, but he's gonna come back at some point, and then unless
So another element is, performance of any kind is, one equation is awareness plus responsibility. So we need to be aware of what is going on. So a conversation like we're having with Sancho that says, what's going on for you? What thoughts are going through your mind? So to talk through in a proper dialogue, with no attachment, you're not going to criticize him in that conversation that says, well, stop thinking like that. That's stupid. That isn't helpful. But somebody who's committed to listening and understanding what's going on for them will allow themselves to gain the insight that said, yeah, I am a good player, aren't I? I actually haven't lost any of that. I'm still a very good player. And in training the other day, actually, that turn I did was absolutely brilliant. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, no, I'm good. Why am I thinking negatively? So that's part of trying to gain awareness about themselves. The more awareness you can gain about yourself, the better chance you can be responsible, i.e. able to respond to your own condition. See, some people would go straight to responsibility. Right, okay, I know what I need. Give me a few techniques. Let me do it and get on with it. Well, they're not necessarily appropriate for you in your situation because everybody's unique. You need to understand it. You understand it for yourself, and certainly if somebody's helping you, for them to understand it. And then suggest, well, how about this? How about that? Maybe there's all sorts of techniques to use. Some work for some people, some work for other people, some don't work at all. And the key is what fits for Sancho. Once he's aware of, it's my thought, but how do I stop it? Then, okay, we can try different things, different ways of looking at it. It could be as simple as, one of the most powerful things, which sounds almost like twee and laughable, is affirmations. To affirm how good you are. And say it to yourself constantly, regularly, even in the mirror. And that's always a beauty. I would use that for footballers. Go on, tell yourself in the mirror. And it's like, oh, God, here we go. I hope nobody's listening to this conversation. Well, don't do it when anybody's around, obviously.
So could you just explain affirmations? What do you mean when we talk about affirmations?
Well, if you think of it is an affirmation, but the negative side of it is to say, I'm having a bad game. I'll never score. It's just not going to go in. I've lost the touch. Oh, my game's gone. I'm going to get dropped. I'll never play football again. You see how catastrophizing that becomes. The affirmation is to stop that, because that's going to come fast. Our negative thoughts are 5 times stronger and appear 5 times faster than positive thoughts. So if you just wander through life, you will get negative thoughts. So the affirmation is to say, hang on a minute, what could we say about ourselves which is much more affirming which is much more positive, which helps our well-being. So, for football, I would say, well, how good are you? Tell me your strengths. What sort of things do you think you bring that's different from the majority of people out there who don't play football at your level? And sometimes you kind of have to push the people in that. You push the footballers into, really expressing, how good. Oh, well, I'm technically fairly good. And I'd be saying, well, fairly good? Really? Well, I'm very good. I've seen you. And I would say, wow, that's amazing. So step it up as high as you can, as long as it's believable for yourself to say something that's not real. But surprisingly, when you watch these footballers, they are amazing. Their touch and their ball control and so on. So then you would turn that into an affirmation and just say, I'm a really gifted player. I'm one of the top midfield players in the Premier League.
Okay, I want to talk about another process that we often get asked to automate, which is the processing of sales orders. So think about a sales order coming into an organisation. Often it's in a PDF or attached to an email. We're using capture technology to extract the information from that sales order. We're checking what products are on there. We're matching it up against a database to say, do these products exist? We're checking the customer name to say, does this customer exist? We might even check the pricing to make sure the pricing is accurate. If all of that matches, then again, we can just push it straight into an ERP system or a finance system and nobody has to touch it. If there are issues with it, if there are things that don't quite match, we just push that to somebody to manually review and check. But ultimately, again, we're pushing it into an ERP or finance system. It's all about making your life easier. It's about making your team's life easier. And it's about getting cash into your organisation quicker and more efficiently. Hopefully that sounds good. If it does, then get in touch. Let's have a coffee and a chat. Enough from me. Back to the podcast.
And actually vocalising that.
Vocalise it for themselves, yeah? Over and over. 10 times. 5 times a day. Sounds like taking some medicine.
Yeah.
And what are you trying to do by doing that?
By feeding the right information into your body. So again, another example that I use is, when I first went to the States, it was in the 70s, and I went across with the family because we've got relatives there. And the thing we were amazed by was we'd sit in a restaurant, and they did the coffee top up, which was really unusual. If you want another coffee, you'd buy it if you're over here. Yeah. And this lady would come round topping the coffee up, and she quite liked our accent, so she kept popping round and seeing us. Now, if you think of, as an analogy, if you think of that cup being you, the vessel, and the coffee being the negative messages that keep coming into you from yourself, from someone else, think of the coffee. So if you do nothing about it, that coffee cup is going to be full. So number one, no thank you. I'll say no thanks to the coffee, and let me put a stop on it, put my hand over it perhaps. I'll have tea. So stopping it is one thing, cancel it, and then putting something else in. And if we change the recipe, let's have tea in there. If it's full of tea, i.e. a positive message, there's no room for the negative message to get in. I don't know whether that's a useful analogy or not, but
it's good. It's good. So have you ever used affirmations? Is it something that you would ever do or see yourself doing?
I think so. I think a lot of us go through what's called imposter syndrome, which you'll be familiar with. And I think when you get into a more senior role in your career, imposter syndrome is amplified.
Yes.
Certainly at the start.
Yeah.
So when I first became MD nearly 4 years ago, thinking, Jesus, I'm relatively young to be an MD. People will be having doubts. I'm managing people that are older than me, that have been here a lot longer than me, and all these things. You think, what am I even doing? What have I got that's special? And then I try to overcome that, and it takes time, because you then think, well, I am here on merit, and I have succeeded for these reasons. And you do start to tell yourself what's worked. And then I try and frame it in what am I best at? And I've got it written on my board, which is my acronym.
Brilliant.
It's my acronym of STOADZI, state the obvious and do something about it. That's all I ever say that I'm doing differently. But I think it's a skill that I do something about stuff all the time.
Brilliant. Perfect example.
So I'm not saying to myself and looking in the mirror and saying, "That you're great" every morning or 50 times a day.
Sure.
But I did come to terms with the fact that I have got some skills that are different from others that allow me to perform well and succeed. And without being big-headed and egotistical, I do kind of remind myself of that. And it helps me relax and no longer have imposter syndrome.
Yeah, and that was a question I was going to ask you. When you look on the board and read that statement, what does it do to you?
Yeah, I think it just helps me relax. It reminds me that things are in hand. I'm comfortable. I deserve to be here, and I know what I'm doing. And I've got the backing of the team as well. So the people around me, the team that I work with every day, they understand STOADZI and my little daft little acronym, but they understand that as well, and that gives me some comfort. It's a difficult one to explain, but I can see how imposter syndrome is something that can be overcome with affirmation. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, just sort of taking it on from there, and the reason I asked you, what does it do for you? And you'd already answered it anyway by saying, I became relaxed. Well, that relaxed state is our true state. Yes. So when you become relaxed, you felt more yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the state we want to be in. Business, football, sport. The more relaxed we are, as in our true state, the more we will perform. Yeah. So for you, you could then perform in making the decisions, the key decisions, handling the team, the choosing your direction of which way to go in the business, and so on and so forth, in a focused way that is not anxious or, I better do this because this will make me look better because I'm running imposter syndrome. Yeah. And you're making all the wrong decisions. The same for sport, and this is where the two, work lovely together, because in sport, you've got much more of a physical connection with it. So the mind and the body are linked inextricably. Affect one part of it, you affect the other. So if you're taking a penalty and you run an imposter syndrome that sort of says, am I good enough to take this in the World Cup final? Yeah. It's going to tell the body to be a bit nervous, be shaky. And it's actually worse than that, because what you're doing is informing the unconscious. So it's not the conscious, it's the unconscious. And most of our work is unconscious. And the unconscious is there to help you. So the unconscious says, you want me to miss the penalty. And it will help you miss. It sounds weird. But that's what happens. They're not thinking, Messi, whose record will be phenomenal of penalties, isn't thinking, what if I miss this? No. He's thinking, he's affirming probably in his head, in a split second, I'm Messi. Well, I'm not going to miss from 12 yards. Goal, that's it.
Absolutely. He's just calm, probably.
Incredibly strong, strong of mind.
It's a certainty. What you want to get to is that certainty of knowing, what I would refer to as knowing. You just know. Yes. You're going to score. I know. I know it. Well, how do you know it? I can't explain. I just know. It's something intrinsic. I'll give you an example. Sorry, Steve. I'll give you an example. I can mention his name. Nicky Wells plays for Bristol City now. Striker. Good striker. Very good.
It was Bradford, wasn't he?
Bradford. Yeah. Huddersfield, Burnley. QPR, and he scored a goal. I remember I was away in the Lake District and I listened to the scores on the radio. 2-2 against Coventry, and last minute or possibly in extra time we get a penalty. He takes the penalty, and you're listening on the radio. Is it going in? Yes, it's gone in. Brilliant. I thought, right, I'll ask him, how did you feel about that penalty? I said, what did you think? And he said, relieved. I said, relieved? what do you mean? He said that I was going to score. And I thought, wow, that's better than I could think of. You know, and that was just, to me, it was class.
Mega confidence.
And that's something, you know, I know from working with him and talking to, you know, his managers. He's got that X factor that strikers have, that they just know where the goal is and they just put it in at the right pace. They can toe end it, they can back heel it. It's going in. And he had that, and it's ice cool, so he's relaxed at that moment. It's ice cool. I mean, the crowd were up. You know, it was. I thought, wow, that tells it.
It does. You hear sports people talk a lot about kind of visualization and kind of visualizing that penalty, I guess, in their head.
Yes.
Weeks and weeks before they take it.
Yes.
Is that common? Is that something that you work on with players?
Definitely.
And I guess what's the point of doing that?
Yeah. Well, again, it's similar to affirmations in the sense that you are pre-programming yourself to what's going to happen, and we can do that. You know, we can decide what's going to happen. So visualizing is a great way of doing it because it will affect all the senses. So when you visualize, it's not just like, oh, let me just do a picture. I see myself scoring the goal. What I would do is encourage and help and even talk through. With some players, I talk them through what's gone on in the game. You know, I'll say, right, what do you want to do? What are you expecting? Right, let me talk it through. And we do it from a relaxed state, so I'd get them relaxed first. But what you want is all the senses. So one, visually, you want the visual sense going in. You want to have the emotional sense. So how does it feel? Just, you know, when you take that penalty, what does it feel like? When it hits the back of the net, what do you notice? Can you hear the crowd roar? What does that do for you? What are you doing physically? You know, what's the little dance that you're celebrating with? You know, so you get to the conclusion, which is celebrating, doing this fancy celebration for the goal, and the unconscious will say, "Oh, to get to that, I needed to have put that ball in the net." So it will support you.
And are these techniques specific to? I guess the answer is no, but is it relevant for all sports? Is it for football? Do you take a different approach than you would to superbikes or whatever else you've worked on?
No, it's the same. It's the same approach. It's just different situations. Same approach for all of us. For business, you might be, fall back into sort of imposter syndrome for a moment because something went wrong, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe I'm not good enough, and I've been kidding myself for the last month. So, and you're going through an important meeting. Visualize it. Visualize the meeting.
I've got
so it helps in that as well.
Yeah, and there's some recent examples that, without going into loads of detail because it wouldn't be right, but some recent examples of what I try and do when we make decisions that haven't worked out as we planned. And I can be accused of being too optimistic, maybe. But sometimes we'll make a decision in business to start a new venture, and I think it was brave to start the new venture because a lot of businesses wouldn't. But what I think is equally brave is to decide that it hasn't worked and to end the new venture. And whereas I think some businesses would carry on knowing that this isn't right for them.
Yes.
And I put that positive spin on it, and it makes me feel better.
Very good.
And we did this has happened this very week, where I'm thinking it was brave and bold and stating the obvious and doing something about it to make some tough decisions and bring an end to something that we've started that's cost us a lot of money. But I'm thinking, well, if I didn't end it now, it'll cost us even more. Yeah. And that's probably an example of me. I didn't realise it until just now. That positive spin that I'm trying to put on it is quite helpful.
Yeah, it's I'd say very helpful. I'm not
going to look back and say, yeah, but it's cost us a lot of money, and yeah, but
no,
it's a failure, or yeah, but some people have done it and we haven't, and therefore we've failed. I don't look at it like that.
No, absolutely. So you've put tea in and said, right, hang on a minute, this is the best decision to make at this point. And I would guess within there you would say, yeah, everybody, makes mistakes. We can't get everything right.
Yeah.
So this is one. And what we do is get out of it fast.
Absolutely.
State the obvious and
do something
about it.
Yeah.
And by the way, that state the obvious and do something about it is awareness plus responsibility.
Yeah.
The awareness is state the obvious. Stating the obvious is not always obvious, is it?
No.
I'm sort of checking, in terms of how you use that. So, sometimes you have to kind of rack your brains and say, what is the obvious here? Actually, it's this, and we need to maybe make the decision to stop doing it.
Yeah.
And then, actually, I've got to go do it. I've got to go tell everybody else who's put a lot of hard work into it, sorry, we're pulling out.
Yeah. And it's not a nice decision, not a nice thing, and it's disappointing and all that, but I'd look at it hugely positively and breathe a sigh of relief. And it goes back to this other thing that we talked about earlier about that's just me. I'm not faking anything. And it's that element of me that's probably led to, the relative success that I think I've had, in terms of getting a decent job and all that. And I breathe a sigh of relief when I think, I'm being me again. We're not faking it. We're not trying something that, and even not just me, but us as a company, because the company has a DNA as well.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah.
And what is this company about? It isn't certain things, and if we stick to what we're great at, I think it's
very good.
I think it's important.
Yeah, I think
we're good at that.
I think that's spot on, and as you say, dropping back to what's real, and something I would say to people is, does it feel right to make that decision?
Absolutely.
And you would go, well, there you go, absolutely. It's like certain, in which case, do it.
Yeah.
If you hesitate and you say, well, I think so.
Yeah.
Then probably it would be helpful to have a bit more conversation about it.
Yeah, I agree.
But you've got that certainty. Great, you follow it, and it's an asset. It's a great asset for you, Rob. I would say, in terms of having that ability to be able to connect with yourself. A lot of people can't do that.
Yeah.
They don't know. Well, what is myself? And they get stuck on it. It's my ego. Then is it? I need to be, a bit more cocky, a bit more this. No, that's your ego. Oh, well, who the hell am I?
Yeah.
And that's, the philosophical question that you'll run through your life. Who am I? And these are, everything's grounded in some real deep meanings of life. And the more you can get into them and understand them, kind of the better.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Because I think one of the things you're really good at from our interactions we've had is taking the layers away and getting to the heart of the individual and the issue.
Yeah.
But what's the trick to doing that? How do you achieve that?
Well, I think being a good listener, and listening for me is a skill that is well underrated. You can listen, and you can really listen, and listen beyond the words. Listen for the emotion. Listen for what's taking place in the other person, without any involvement. So you're just listening from nothing. Let me hear. Our little minds are still going. So the listener is still thinking. A lot of times we listen in order to speak, don't we? It's like, I'm listening. Bang, this is what I think. But actually we weren't listening because I was too eager to get my bit in.
Yeah.
So one strength is listening, and listening without any judgment or opinion. That allows the person speaking to be much more reflective and much more aware of themselves. So they're doing their own work in that. And then it's questioning. So questioning in a safe way, not in an interrogative way, that allows you to, as you say, peel the layers up, just drill down and say, well, it was because of this, this situation, that's why it was. Well, what was it about that situation? What did you feel at that moment? And why did that affect you so much? Well, it was because I've had this before. I once was with a guy and he did this. Oh, right. So there was something else before that. What was it about that? And why has that affected you so much? So on and so forth is drilling down and trying to reveal, potentially a core that says, okay, maybe now we'll reframe that situation. And again, if we don't want to get deep, but we're all affected by childhood. And between 0 and 5, things that happen are formed. They're ingrained in our brain. The neurons have connected in our brain, and it's become an opinion. More than that, it's become a belief. And more than that, for some people, it's become a truth. That don't talk to people with brown shoes, because they'll hurt you. Because I had a bad experience. I didn't even know it, but unconsciously I had this bad experience of people wearing brown shoes. Every time I see it, it triggers me.
Yeah.
So, in a deeper sense, if you could get to that and then reframe it, get the awareness and say, like, now look at it from an adult point of view to that child and say, so what was the difference? They just had brown shoes. And what they did to you was this, but the brown shoes and what they did is not connected. They just happened to be wet. It could have been black shoes. So then you could do something which would help to reframe that. Now, the great thing of being able to do that, if you can do that well, it undoes all the events going forward. So the most recent event where you're trying to shift your state so you perform better, then will be much easier and much more natural and much more from yourself rather than from your need to avoid being hurt.
Okay, me again, just jumping in to talk about one of the processes that we often get asked to automate, which is the processing of supplier invoices, also known as accounts payable automation. So what does that mean? Well, most businesses receive invoices from their suppliers, and a lot of businesses still have people that are manually reviewing those invoices, making sure that they're correct, making sure they're accurate, and then manually rekeying them into a finance system or an ERP system. Well, our solution can automate that process. So typically an invoice will come in, we'll use capture technology to understand what's on that invoice. We'll then match that data up against goods received note to make sure that we've received the product. We'll match it up against purchase order data to make sure that somebody has placed an order for that product. And ultimately, if we can match that up, we can automatically push that into an ERP system or finance system, and nobody has to touch it. How good does that sound? If there are exceptions, if there are things that need to be checked, that's fine. We can use digital workflow to push that to somebody to eyeball it and say, is this correct or does something need to change? Ultimately, though, that can then be pushed again into an ERP system or a finance system. This is about making your life easier. It's about making operations as quick and as efficient as possible. And we do that all the time. If that sounds interesting, then get in touch. That's enough from me. Back to the podcast.
The deeper you get, the more deep you make the change, that'll kind of proliferate.
Yes,
out.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like getting to the core. It's like saying, okay, you've got a headache, let me give you a pill. It's like, why do we keep getting headaches? Can we examine it a little bit more as a doctor? Let me understand. I see you're always using this particular light, or you stay up late at night and you're not really getting sleep. Let's examine that rather than just giving you a pill.
Could we go back to sports again?
Yep.
I think one of the things that's over the last couple of years has been lots of sports documentaries, and we touched on this before the podcast, but I found it fascinating watching the Arsenal documentary with Arteta.
Yeah.
I just wanted your view on him as a leader, given the fact that you spend a lot of time working with leaders, and both from a sports and business background. What do you see in him? The fact that they're top of the league. Are they top of the league? They were top of the league.
Yeah. They still are, aren't they? Yeah.
What do you see in him from that documentary that you kind of admire?
Well, one thing we were talking about earlier was his enthusiasm. So his state of being. See, as a leader, it's not what you're doing; it's the way you're being. I don't know whether you resonate with this. It's that state of being, which is kind of hard to touch. It's like, well, I can't give you it from a book. You just are, because we're human beings, not human doings. So one is state of being, his enthusiasm, that kind of excitement that he generates, engenders excitement in others. The other thing that I would have picked up from him was he avoids criticism as much as possible, but if it's necessary, because he needs to speak what he sees as the truth. Like, you've had the worst first half ever. They're going to know about it, and it's clear. But in the main, he's keeping it positive, and he uses good analogies. So some of his things that he wrote on the board, and that's another factor coming in. But the things he wrote on the board were good analogies to explain what's going on.
Yeah,
and to help. So you're helping somebody else, the receiver, which is your team, get the message. Not like, look, I've told you 10 times, kick the ball harder, and they don't. It's like, well, change the message, make it clearer. Perhaps they don't understand that, and perhaps they don't like being told. Most of us, I definitely include myself, I hated being told what to do. I reacted to it, so it wasn't helpful. Now, show me and give me a good reason, or encourage me. I'm different.
Yeah.
And I think that's something Arteta did. The other part that was just occurring to me as we were speaking then was he shared himself. So he shared his vulnerability. You've been doing that just in this conversation. That's great, that, because you're sharing something. Oh, I had that imposter syndrome. Some people couldn't do that. You did. And it's endearing, but I'm not just saying this because we're having this conversation, but it draws you to you. I felt drawn to you. It's like, oh, it's great, that. Yeah, no, I get that. And as you're drawn to a person because of their sharing of their vulnerability, and sharing some experiences of theirs, you are engaged with them. So then they can give you a message that said, and I tell you what, you're losing your marker. Can you get tighter to him when they're taking the throw-ins? Get tighter on his left-hand side. You're going to take that message and say, "Yeah, I will, boss."
Yeah.
Whereas, as opposed to being told.
Yeah, I think you can see the evolution in football management with people that have had success, managers that have had success in recent years in England, for instance, Pep and Klopp and Arteta and Ten Hag now at Man U. The way they act with their players would be unheard of 20 years ago.
Yes.
You didn't see Brian Clough and Alex Ferguson so much dancing with the players or putting their arm around them and cuddling them at the end of a match and all that. That unity is such a different way. You can see how it's evolved massively in the last. It's probably more than 20 years, but more recently, the way that Klopp is and Pep particularly.
No, you're right.
No, I think it's very true. It has changed, and the other thing that I think probably common through them all is there's a discipline as well. So they'll do all the arm around the shoulder, playing with them, allowing them to take the mickey out of them perhaps, because they're building that bond, but they're also the leader.
Yeah.
And they've also got a discipline that says, Rashford, you were late. I know you slept in and it was unfortunate, but I'm going to have to drop you. And Rashford goes, I agree with you, boss.
Fair enough, boss. Yeah.
I'll get on at half time and I'll score.
Yeah.
Wow. No, that takes balls, doesn't it, to do that. Arteta getting rid of Aubameyang takes discipline. But what it says to and Ronaldo going from Man United, the message it sends is very, very clear.
Yeah.
Nobody's immune from this discipline.
It's rigor. We again on my board, my whiteboard, I've got all these statements that I hear or think of or whatever. And one I read in this case was it's rigor or rigorousness as opposed to ruthlessness. Yes. So someone from the outside might say he's sacked Aubameyang. He's a ruthless, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's absolute rigor because he's following his disciplined rules.
Yeah.
It's
very
a
good.
very different way of explaining it. I say it's not ruthless when we make changes in this business. It's not. It's absolute rigor that we've got to do what's necessary. It might not be popular, but it's what's necessary for this. Sounds a bit philosophical, but for the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely is, and it's it's fair. It wants to be seen as being fair.
Yeah.
If people can see it as that's fair enough, Rashford would say that's fair enough, and he'll admit it in the interview afterwards. Then that's fine. If it's ruthless, as in, hang on, haven't you spotted all the things I've been doing really well? and yet you've just decided you want to drop me, then it doesn't appear fair, and that perhaps is ruthless. And why did I drop you? Because I don't like you.
Yeah.
I don't like the way your haircut. And that would work against, in my mind, the team, work against success, and certainly work against the leader, because once the leader loses the troops, we're on shaky ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're only as good as your team.
It's very true. Yeah, I thought the same about Arteta on the Aubameyang. I think to make that decision, I think he was the top goal scorer. He was their top player probably at that point in time.
Yeah.
To say, actually, for these reasons, I'm going to get rid of you. For probably short-term pain, because he had nobody to replace him with.
No,
but he saw the bigger picture, and he saw what was best for the team.
Yeah, and it's having the rigor to stick by it, even though they did sell him till the last minute, did they? And they couldn't get a replacement without knowing how much are we going to get for him in terms of budgets and so on. But it's like, still the right decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it. Is strong, rigorous leadership.
Just talking about football, actually, you obviously do work individually in terms of high performance. Do you ever work with teams of people in terms of high performance, and how is that different? What's the approach you take with that?
Yeah, not in football. I've not worked with teams in football. One of the reasons, a few reasons. Sometimes the managers want to do their own thing anyway. I'm not saying I could do things better as a team, but also you've got, because you've got a lot of egos in football, then you've got influences. Potentially harder to influence the group than it is the individual, and I think if you affect the individual, you'll also affect the group.
Yeah.
So I'll just sidetrack for a second. One of the guys, the first guy I started working with, we got on famously, and the conversations were much bigger than just football. And he turned from being, and I did it as a free thing because I just wanted to prove we can make a difference here. And he went from being highly criticised by the fans. It was like, get rid of him. It's Peter Taylor's old mate, this, that, and the other. Peter Taylor was the manager when I first worked with Bradford City. To the end of that season, winning 6 out of 7 of the Player of the Year awards. And everybody's saying, wow, isn't he so consistent? Now with him, what I also then started to do was say, what's happening in the group? What are you noticing? Now that you've got an awareness for yourself, what are you noticing in the group? Who could you help? Oh, well, so-and-so, he seems to get really down about such and such. Okay, what could we do about it? And I would try and work through him to help the other players. Again, because I can mention him, Naki Wells was one of them. Naki Wells. It was helping him before I started working with Naki, and didn't work with him till Phil Parkinson came. And another guy who, Cal McHugh, who now plays in Indian Super League. He went on to be Motherwell captain from Bradford. It was at Plymouth, got promoted to Plymouth. And again, he was being, I was helping him via the other player.
Wow. So you're teaching him how to coach? You're teaching your contact how to coach others?
Effectively, yeah. Yeah, use what they've learned to help them become better. It's going to help the team. That's all I was interested in. And they remembered it, because then when I started working with those players, because surprise, I ended up working with them. They said, "Oh, it's funny that." It was Luke who told me that. He said something similar. I said, "Oh, well, it's not a surprise, by the way, because I was having conversations." And they're happy about that. Yeah. Because the intention is right. So again, as a leader, Rob, as long as your intention is good, then we can kind of go anywhere with the conversation. And again, it's that real and that rigor as opposed to ruthless. The intention isn't to, put somebody down in the team. The intention is to try and grow the business or win this account or improve the way you're working, stop, you're feeling, less of a member of the team or whatever. That's the intention. Then everything we're doing is to help that. And it's good to remind ourselves of the intention, because that means we will then speak the right way.
Yeah. And what about if you were brought into
teams,
work? We're in a business setting. You were brought into work with a leadership team. How would you approach that?
Yeah. Well, generally, and there are all sorts of different situations working with the team, but as a very general thing, then I would get the team together. Ideally, the top team, because work with the top, you make biggest difference, the highest leverage throughout the business. Not change the leader, but help the leader become himself. The business transforms. So work with the top team. So I would have a particular program of making them aware of what makes a difference in business, what creates results, and talk that through with them. Then the model I use is called the foundation of results. What we drill down is from, here's a result, what's the result you want? What do you have to do to get that result? Well, take action, do something, make a decision. So there's actions. Then go below that, and that tends to be what I'd say to people is that's like the tip of the iceberg. So just do actions, do another action. Right, okay, that's not working. Right, do the same action, but make it louder. say it more. And actually, that's a bit definition of madness. We just keep doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result. So go below that. And going below that is to decide on what actions to take. We want more opportunities. The more opportunities we have, the more choices of actions. Underneath that is possibilities. And possibilities are, I say everything is created twice, once in our mind and once for real. So if we're designing something, creating something, kind of got to see it. So there's a bit of visualizing going on. We see it and then we create it. So it'll turn into an opportunity. Yeah, we can do something with that. That one's a great possibility, but a bit wild. We can leave that. And then you say, well, what's the foundation? What's underneath that? And the word I use is relatedness or trust, probably fits better for people. But that relatedness is the way in which a team relates, way in which it interacts with people. So, it's much more than relationship. It's a way of being together that engenders possibilities. When a team trusts each other, possibilities pop out from all sorts of places. Actually, I've got a thought that could we do such and such? One, the environment is safe to say that. You're not going to get put down. Well, how would you know? You're only a junior account handler. No, it's like your opinion is just as valuable. And a possibility pops up, and they would say, is that something we could take forward? Maybe it is. Great idea. So I would explain that and have a conversation around that. We'll do certain things in there as well, just to build the team, little exercises. And then I would also explain a little bit of how our brain works and how we're affected by the past in the present moment. Even though we're trying to be blue sky thinking and think about the future, can't do it unless you understand, well, where does my thinking come from? Why do I think that way and somebody else thinks another way? Well, we're wired. So the more we can understand that and then try and drop or recognize that's just an opinion of mine. It's not the truth. Why am I being so aggressive about wanting that in the process when actually it's just an opinion. It's just the same as their opinion. Then we can open things up and say, okay, from that present moment, what do we want to create now? And hopefully we're creating from a more real space, a more self-expressed state than just more of the past being regurgitated into the future. So that's a bit of a process of what goes on during a day or 2 days with the team. And out of it comes conversations. We would open up conversations which one, our good conversations where we're acknowledging each other for the good things that we do, because that often doesn't happen because we're busy. But we'll also have conversations which are getting in the way. So if something's getting in the way for me in doing something with you, Steve, then I would help them have that conversation in a safe way that helps me, because I'm glad I've got rid of that, and would help you. Oh, didn't realise that. I thought it was because of this, our relationship. And as you can clear that, it's like clearing blockages. As you clear it, the more you clear, the clearer we move forward. And it's like a vacuum. It's like if we want to get to the end of the table and there's things in the way, like Mike, this cup, we could kind of work our way around it, or we could say, that seems to be getting in the way big time. Can we clear it? And as we clear it, almost like it's a vacuum, we just go there. It just happens. It's like magic.
Like that.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, that's teams and teams. Then you move on to whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. But I would, and it is something. I think because I've had feedback about it, it's something that is a bit peculiar for me, because I will just create the space. My job is to create the space to have the conversation. So I'm working with really great teams, fantastic teams, one not far from here. I do a lot of work with. And they get on well. They can virtually say anything they want. They're very successful in terms of performance and so on. But when we have a meeting together, then somehow, and I guess partly because I'm coming from outside, if I'm just come with no extra grind, we just create an even safer space. So the conversations will go all over the place, but at the end of it, we will feel a lot better about things. And actually, we may well have cleared some big blockages.
Can I ask you about generations? Actually, something that you touched on. You could probably go back to football again, actually, in the sense of the management has changed and the way the managers manage has changed.
Yes.
What are you experiencing that when you're dealing with individuals? And have people changed, or is it a generational thing? Are you having to work differently with this generation than you did the previous generation, or?
Yeah, I think what I notice is the change is more. People have become much more aware, much more savvy about what is. The old school method was, oh well, you're the boss, you know best. Do as I'm told. I should only do this, and I'll leave at 5 and I start at 9, and I've done my job. Whereas now, people are value doing good things, and let me just get it finished. I'd rather get this finished because I'm committed to doing something that I feel I've contributed to. And also savvy in the sense of they're not as gullible to bullshit. So if you're saying, well, do this because so and so, well, can I just ask you why would you do that? Well, don't bother asking why, just do it. Isn't going to help in my mind. So being able to question and the beauty of that questioning is it allows that person to get involved in it and be much more committed. So I think it's that. I think it's that awareness that what do you call it? Almost like self-development. People are much more self-developed, much more aware. There's a lot of resources now, isn't there, in terms of understanding what am I about? There's lots of podcasts to listen to that you get lots of incredible information about things. And certainly one of the differences in my field is psychology was thought of as there's something wrong with you if you need a psychologist. And again, I had this in football, the same player that I was talking about earlier. they'd say he shared with me. He said, "Where you going? Where you going? Look," he said, "I'm off to see John Muranka." Why? What's he do? Oh, psychologist. What do you want that for? What's that about? You don't want that. You want to just get stuck in,
man up.
Yeah, man up. Yeah, nice. Now he was confident enough to be able to say, "Well, it works for me," and off he'd go. But that effectively is in the psyche of people, perhaps.
But it's safer for this generation, or the younger generation. It's safer than it's ever been.
Yes.
To be more, voice your opinion, share your opinion, access other people's opinions. It's far more widespread, isn't it?
Yeah, and to get help. I probably noticed now, thinking about it, that some people, you hear them on podcasts and they say, "Oh yeah, well, I'm still seeing a therapist." And like a therapist sort of would seem like there's something wrong, but it's almost like to them, it's like, well, something wrong with you if you're not seeing somebody.
It's shifted the other way.
And people, so it becomes more an accepted norm. That you get help. And of course it is. It is. Why wouldn't you want some help? You get plenty of, what I always say is you get plenty of help in terms of your diet, your fitness, your training, your technique. Why don't you want somebody to help you with the way you think?
I think that's a great point to leave it on. Thank you very much for joining us, John.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.